Hey guys, Alex the Captain here from the College Sports Connection podcast, talking to you today about our partnership with Bandwagon Fantasy Sports. Do you think you know college football better than us? Join our free league on the Bandwagon Fantasy Sports app to find out. Bandwagon is the only simple, engaging, and competitive fantasy sports platform focused on the teams rather than the individual players. You can download this app on the Apple Store, and you can join our league by looking up the CSC Podcast League, passcode CSC 2022. Again, that is the CSC Podcast League, passcode CSC 2022. Did I mention it's free? Download the Bandwagon Fantasy Sports app and come play today.
What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where AA, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me as always, it's AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, we attended Media Day last month. We had a great time talking to the different schools, different coaches. Now we are just a little over a week away from the MAC season kicking off with 5 non-conference games starting on Thursday, September 1st. How pumped are you?
It's finally here. We never thought it'd get here, but it finally got here, and it's happening quick. So we're going to have, football on TV every weekend until the Super Bowl from now on. That's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. And gives me a reason to be lazy on Saturdays and Sundays, so I'm not mad about it.
Also, no Bachelor on Thursday nights, at least to start the season. So there's a plus there. Tonight, though, we are doing something a little bit different. We're bringing a truly awesome roundtable with contributors from the best G5 coverage in the country, the group of 5 guys, Jesse Grisham, Jeff Murray, and Matt Sprouse. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, man. We're fired up to be on.
And then we have one of the contributors to SB Nation's Hustle Belt, the longtime blog focused solely on the Mid-American Conference, Zach Follador. Zach, thanks for joining us, man.
Alex, AJ, thanks for having me back, guys. It's been a while, long time to talk. But yeah, as you mentioned, we're 10 days from kickoff? I mean, less than that if you count week 0. So finally football season. I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So guys, let's just dive right in. Let's talk about who's winning the conference this year. Let's just get that one out of the way. Who do you guys have going? I know I texted AJ a little bit about this week, and we've kind of switched up our opinions on this. For us, I think Northern Illinois, they have to be the prohibitive favorite. You know, last year they had 76 freshmen on a championship roster. Few lucky breaks, people say, went one way for them. I disagree, especially after talking with Coach Hammock. I think Northern Illinois is the prohibitive favorite to repeat. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that. I think NIU is the consensus. In my opinion, I think the MAC championship is October the 8th when Toledo goes to NIU. And I think winner of that game plays for, and also October the 8th is Kent State at Miami. So those, in my opinion, those are that's your championship weekend essentially. And then I'm leaning towards NIU just because I think they've got a culture. They're a little more blue collar to me. So that's
in the words of the worst broadcaster in ESPN, not so fast, my friend. When you look at MAC right now, I think history repeats itself. Saw a stat where it said there hasn't been a back-to-back same team going to the championship since 2000, or winning the championship since 2011, 2012. That was NIU.
That means you read our article.
I gotta tell you, I think we'll talk about them a lot this show. I certainly will. I really love Eastern Michigan. I think they're going to win that side of the conference. I think they're going to upset NIU. But they will meet Miami, Ohio, who I think is just a juggernaut of that conference. I have Miami, Ohio actually beating Eastern Michigan. But don't sleep on Eastern Michigan this year. I think they're going to have a lot of wins.
Even with the loss of your favorite quarterback, Ben Bryant?
Ben Bryant's a coward. and he did that team a service by moving on to Cincinnati.
Yeah, we'll see when he becomes the starter at Cincinnati. But I think NIU is the clear favorite. I don't know how you pick against them with all the talent they have coming back, and you got Rocky Lombardi coming back. I mean, he's a stud. He had a great season last year. And I'm a QB guy. So anytime you got a proven QB that has done it, I mean, and they're like, they were somewhat young last year too. That's the crazy thing. So you got so many guys coming back. Their O-line, 4 starters coming back. I don't know how you pick against them.
Right. I mean, yeah, I have NIU as well. You know, you look at Rocky Lombardi last year, he had 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, only 8 picks. And you look at the first 4 games of their season this year, it's Eastern Illinois, Tulsa, Vanderbilt, and then at Kentucky. There is no doubt in my mind they can come out of that 4-game stretch 3-1, possibly 4-0.
Yeah.
But 3-1, I think Vanderbilt goes to DeKalb. I've been to DeKalb a few times back in 2013, especially Ball State went there, and Jordan Lynch, Keith Winning, shootout game, incredible environment in the MAC. I really think they come out of that 4-game stretch 3-1, go right into conference play at Ball State there on the first.
I was listening on ESPNU radio. I'm not going to give people a shout out on who I was listening to. I was coming back from work and they were talking about week 0 and, you know, Vanderbilt, they're playing Hawaii. And then it got brought up about Vanderbilt having to win 2.5 games this year, you know, for the betting guys out there, the over and under. And then the NIU game got brought up and they were just saying, well, that's a game they have to win. If they're going to get over 2 wins, they have to win NIU. Well, as they're doing their radio show, I think they're actually starting research. And one of the guys goes, they did win the conference last year. They do have 17 starters returning. They're like, oh. So I don't think Vanderbilt's going to win that game.
Yeah, bad news, ESPN, because
I hear where you're all coming with the NIU hype, and I'm right there with you. I think NIU is going to have a really good year, but I'm going to go a little bit contrary here. I think when I look at the conference this year, I look at the talent that's returning across the board. I really like Central Michigan. I think, honestly, everyone talks about Lou Nichols with good reason. He's not the best offensive player in the conference. He's the best player overall in the conference, led the nation in rushing yards last year, 1,800 rushing yards. I also think Daniel Richardson is one of the most underappreciated players in the MAC. You look last year, this is a guy did not start at the beginning of the year. Remember, Jacob Sermon transferred in from Washington to start the year. He started the first 3 games, but Daniel Richardson eventually took that job over, finished the year 61% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This is a guy who's efficient. Obviously, they lose Khalil Pimpleton on the outside. That's a big loss. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. They also had 2 offensive linemen drafted back in April in the NFL draft, but you still have your three interior offensive linemen returning. You have Richardson and Lou Nichols back in the backfield. And Alex, to kind of piggyback on a point that you mentioned when you were talking about NIU, I can't help but feel that some of those coin flip games are going to go the other way this year. I mean, you look at their season last year. 1-point win against Georgia Tech, 2-point win against Toledo, 1-point win against Central Michigan, 1-point win against Ball State, 6-point win against Buffalo. I mean, that's 5 wins there by a touchdown or less. I'm not saying that can't happen again, but I am saying it's unlikely that if they have 6 games that come down to 1 possession again this year, I don't think they're winning all 6 of them. I mentioned that Central Michigan game. I mean, Central Michigan had Northern Illinois beat last year in Mount Pleasant. Northern Illinois came back in the second half and Central Michigan botched that field goal attempt on the last play of the game to send Northern Illinois escape with that victory. But I really like the Chippewas this year, and piggyback off of Jesse's point, I don't see anybody challenging Miami in the East. Brett Gabbert coming back, one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. You also have when I look at the rest of the Eastern Division, I mean, Kent State, I expect them to take a step back. They lose Dustin Crum. They've never figured out defense under Sean Lewis. I don't expect that to change this year. And then you look the rest of the teams in that division, Ohio, Buffalo, Bowling Green, Akron, all kind of in various stages of rebuilding. I think Miami probably has the easiest path to a championship only because they're far and away the best team in that division. But I'm going to go with the Chippewas, guys. I'm going to go a little contrary here. I think Central Michigan's going to get back to Detroit and bring home the trophy this year.
I don't have an issue with the Central Michigan pick at all. You look at their red zone efficiency, they were 90th in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how you win football games, especially in the Mid-American Conference. When you rank 10th in the MAC in terms of red zone efficiency, you're only beating Bowling Green and Akron in that category. Everybody knows the MAC is an offensive conference. You got to be able to score when it matters. And I think that's what kept Central Michigan out of Detroit a year ago. Even that 1-point loss to Northern Illinois, you can't let them come back into that game. Central Michigan goes and kicks a field goal anytime in the fourth quarter, they win that game.
Yeah.
So you got to be more efficient in the red zone. I like what Lou Nichols does. I think he's the most prolific player in the conference. You mentioned Daniel Richardson, and his lack of picks was nice, but there's one quarterback not only better in the conference, but best in the country at not turning the ball over, and that's DeQuan Finn out of Toledo. He had 2 picks on the entire season, which led the country in being the least picked quarterback. And he's only a sophomore.
I feel like Toledo's probably the most talented team in the MAC, and they're not, I mean, they're getting some love. Everybody's just leaning towards NIU, but I mean, if you remember, they gave Notre Dame all they could handle last year. And DeQuan Finn, anytime we talked about it on our deal, anytime it's Tuesday night and it's, 23 degrees, there's a couple hundred people there. Like, that's that quarterback that can win you a game or two just because he's athletic and doesn't turn it over.
Well, he's athletic. He doesn't turn it over, and he has a get out of jail free card with his legs. Yep. I mean, he can extend a play for as long as you need him to extend one for, to get somebody open, to scramble for a first down, whatever it is. Penalties is obviously what killed Toledo last year. Led the country with 130 penalties. You can't win games with that many penalties. The 129th team in the country had 118 penalties last year. Toledo with 130. So it's just not. That's not how you win a conference. That's why you go 7-6. That's why you lose a game that you should have won in South Bend. That's why you lose the game to Eastern Michigan. That's why you lose the bowl game to Middle Tennessee. You can't have penalties. And I think replacing Bryant Koback on the offensive side, that's a tall task for Toledo.
And Alex, I think I agree wholeheartedly with your point about the penalties. And it's crazy. Matt, you mentioned that Toledo is probably the most talented team in the conference. Every year we say that in the preseason. Every year, tons of people pick Toledo to win the conference. And every year since 2017, they've underperformed. Like, Alex, I know you're an alum and a huge fan, and I don't want to sound
don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Ignore the Toledo flag and jersey in the background.
It's just to me, my questions with Toledo have nothing to do with the roster. It has everything to do with the coaching staff and the management of that roster and the talent. Jason Candle, to me, like, this is a prove-it year for Jason Candle. If Toledo doesn't compete for a MAC championship this year, I don't know where the Rockets go from here, because as we've been talking about, I mean, every year he goes out and he recruits the best or the second best class in the conference, right? He brings in the talent, but that's only half the battle. You got to develop the talent. You got to put it together, make it into a whole once it's on campus. And as great as DeQuan Finn is, as great as some of the individual contributors that they have are, I just don't know if I trust them to put it all together. Mm-hmm. I think if we're going on talent alone, I would pick Toledo to win the conference. They got to show me that they can put it all together before I have any confidence.
I was just going to say, they have a tough stretch on their schedule as well. I mean, they go at Ohio State, at San Diego State, Central Michigan at home, NIU, Kent State. Yeah, I mean, that is just such a tough stretch of that schedule. Now, can they get through that? I don't know. I think their defense is going to be a lot better this year with 5, all MAC guys coming back. But that's just one heck of a stretch in the schedule.
It is. And Zach, you brought up the management of the roster. Last year, Toledo had 18 different guys catch the ball. And they lose their third leading receiver, Matt Landers, who transferred from Georgia to Tennessee, or from Georgia to Toledo to Arkansas now. I mean, he only had 514 yards in the season with 5 touchdowns, but nevertheless, getting the ball to 18 different people shows kind of lack of management and playmakers, because you have a mix of tight ends, receivers. DeQuan Finn even had a reception, I believe. And so it was all these guys getting the ball with no consistency on the perimeter. And DeQuan can move the ball. He can create havoc in the pocket. He can escape if he needs to, but he needs dependability down the field. And that's kind of one of the questions, not only for Toledo, but in the conference this year, is when it comes to quarterbacks and wide receivers. I think wide receivers is going to be a huge question mark for Toledo this year.
And I think it's interesting, right? As we look at Toledo, you mentioned this being kind of a make it or break it year for Jason Candle, right? I think that there's a couple coaches in the conference who are on the hot seat to some degree. I think Scott Loeffler at Bowling Green is on the hot seat. This is a big year for him. He's been in charge of the program now for 3 years. This is year 4. and he's got 2 signature wins to their name. The win over Minnesota last year in Minnesota, and in his first season, the win over Toledo. Those are the 2 signature wins that he has. He's lost 2 in a row to Akron, who fired their coach halfway through the year last year. So this is not a Bowling Green team who is used to losing, or a program that's used to losing. They played for several MAC championships just a decade ago. And so it's interesting to see where he's at. So I think those are the 2 coaches who are kind of on the hot seat. But I want to talk about the coaches who are the safest. I think we've got Chris Creighton out of Eastern Michigan. That's your team. And I think Thomas Hammock is safe. And I want to say Mike New is probably safe. He's 2 years removed from a MAC championship, but he still had a winning record last year. They gave him that extension. AJ, you know what the extension was for. It was for like 3 or 4 years for something like $800,000 a year or something.
3 years, I believe it was. But obviously this year's it's going to be a rebuilding year in Muncie. Losing Drew Plitt, who unfortunately was cut today from Cincinnati. Really thought he'd get on Cincinnati. He had a nice preseason. I thought he'd been a good backup for Joe Burrow, but I think he put a lot on tape, so I think he'll be playing on Sundays, if not a backup or a practice squad guy. But yeah, I think Mike New will be around for a little bit. We've talked to him at Media Day and the MAC championship and whatnot, and he's a Ball State guy. He's an Indianapolis kid, played at Ball State, started as a freshman, so he knows what. And obviously, the new incoming quarterback this year, John Paddock, has been in the program, but he's had to wait his turn behind Drew Plitt. And he'll be ready to go. But there are some freshmen and some younger players behind Paddock who are going to push him. But Coach New has been in that position before as a player, similar to Coach Lester at Western. Developing a new quarterback, somebody who hasn't played a lot. I think it's going to be a learning curve in Muncie this year. But I think Coach New will be around for a little while.
So those are my picks for really who's safest, as well as Coach Tim Lester up at Western Michigan. He's done the impossible task of keeping that program going after losing what they lost to Minnesota with PJ Fleck and all that hype around that program. So I'm excited to see what those coaches do. Are there coaches that you guys have on the hot seat that maybe we're not talking about? Could it be Tim Albin from Ohio, or could it be maybe even Chuck Martin from Miami? I think he's probably safe, but who do you guys have?
Yeah, I think McElwain's probably pretty safe too. But I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm looking at Kent State, I'm just looking at Sean Lewis, and I don't know. This is not probably anything statistical. I just think he's a young guy, kind of an energy guy. And I think sometimes that stuff it doesn't last. Mm-hmm. And then, if you lose Crum and everything he brought, they may drop off big time. Yeah. And then you're going to hear people start talking, oh, he's too young. Oh, they were just Dustin Crum. And then, you guys are up in that territory. So I don't know how big the boosters get to talking at a place like Kent State, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's super hot, but I think 2 or 3 rough seasons and he will be.
Yeah, the seat's getting a little warm. Just, losing the game last year, and then I forget who mentioned it. They don't do defense at Kent State. I mean, The MAC isn't known for its defense. I don't know if you've been listening to us for a while, but defense doesn't exist in the Mid-American Conference, but especially not at Kent State when you've got guys like Dustin Crum who can put up 40 points a game. You don't need a defense until you do.
Yeah, and NIU
right
work to them. So
right, yeah, that was relatively ugly for Sean Lewis and company, but they did get a new offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator this year. They replaced their defensive coordinator actually right before the MAC championship. Obviously that didn't work out, but now he's got a year and he's out of the offseason to kind of install what he wants to do. Tom Kaufman was the last guy, and they let him go. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do with the new defensive coordinator, and I guess what direction he's going to go.
Yeah, and then how do they get? Sorry, Zach. And then just how do they get? What systems he going to want to do? Is he going to have to go through a recruiting cycle to get guys that fit a certain strategy? So that's just to be seen.
Yeah, I to add into Kent State to your guys' point real quick. I don't necessarily think that Sean Lewis's seat is hot only because of how bad Kent State was whenever he got there. Mm-hmm. That would be my only point. However, I will agree with you in the sense that it feels a little bit like Sean Lewis missed his opportunity to cash in and turn that into a bigger job, right?
Yeah.
Where it felt like last year was kind of the year. Like but you have Dustin Crum, you have all these guys coming back. If they could have won like 9 games last year and won a MAC championship, he absolutely would have gotten hired away by a bigger school. Instead, they go 7-5. They lose in the MAC championship game. They have a poor performance in their bowl game against Wyoming, finish 7-7. Now it kind of feels like they're kind of coming back to the foundation, and he's going to have to start over again. I don't know how likely it is that he's going to get them back to the point where they were. So that would be kind of my agreement with you guys on Sean Lewis. One other thing I wanted to add quickly here. Alex, I think a guy that is quietly kind of on the hot seat here that you mentioned very briefly, Tim Albin at Ohio. I know this is only year 2 for him, but you think about, you look at the last 4 years of the Frank Solich era there at Ohio, 9 wins in a bowl game, 9 wins in a bowl game, 7 wins in a bowl game. They only went 2-1. They only played 3 games in that pandemic shortened season in 2020. But going into last year, there were a lot of people still picking Ohio to win the Eastern Division of the MAC. They had O'Shawn Allison and Devontre Tuggle both back at running back in the backfield. There was a sense that they were going to have one of the best rushing attacks in the MAC, and they were going to win the East, and they were going to go to the MAC championship game. And then they lost to Duquesne in week 2. And, you finish that season 3-9. The leash gets considerably shorter when you fail to meet expectations like that in year 1, right? So I think that's a program where if Ohio goes 3-9 or 4-8 again, I wouldn't be surprised to see them make a change.
But he was hired in last July, was he not? He didn't get a full off season behind. They recruited his own players, was he?
He was the offensive coordinator.
He's part of the staff, but those weren't his players that he got to bring in.
Right.
I'm a big believer in if you're going to hire a new coach, you got to give him at least 3 years, at least get some recruits in and his players that he wants. And granted, they have an underperforming year, of course. But I just don't know if you chop the guy off after one more bad year, which is probably going to happen.
Something I do. No, absolutely. And you make a good point there, Jesse, right? As Zach, to kind of go off your point a little bit as well, bring the fact that he was already on that staff. He did have some hand in that recruiting, right? He says, hey, these are players that I want in the system, things like that. But to your point, Jesse, we found out before Media Day 2021, literally 3 days before Media Day, that Frank Solich said, hey, I'm retiring. I'm done. And so that changed everything for how Media Day predictions went, things like that, how those discussions went. But Zach, you mentioned it. Everybody is still talking Ohio, going to be very competitive in the East. The same thing happened with Buffalo. Maurice Linguist got hired in real late because Lance Leipold got hired away to Kentucky or to Kansas, and that threw everybody for a loop. So I think this year is going to be a critical year for those 2 coaches in terms of kind of establishing what they want to establish, being who they want to be, and bringing their personality and whatnot to the program. So I'm not completely on board with them being on the hot seat, but I do think that there's eyes are on them as they move forward.
Sure. And Tim Albion too, he's been in the program since 2005. So really in the infancy of Frank Solich, he's been the offensive coordinator or running backs coach. So he's been around. I think they'll get the program going. They'll get things moving this year. They bring back Curtis Rorke, quarterback who's played a little bit. I think once he gets settled in, I think they'll be all right.
Do y'all think, if you don't mind, Alex, do y'all think that if a guy's an OC for whatever that was, 20 years, and then he becomes the head coach, does that say something about maybe he's a great X's and O's coach? Maybe he's a great offensive coordinator, but maybe he just doesn't have that cultural CEO kind of, leadership ability? Or you think it's just tough couple seasons, they'll be back?
I think he's gonna go through his rough because his schedule is gonna change. He's gonna have more responsibility. He's gonna be the guy now. So he has to deal with the media. He has to deal with all the recruiting. So there's gonna be a lot more thrown on his plate, but it's stuff he's been around. He's coached at Nebraska. He's coached at Northwestern, Oklahoma, all these places. So he's been around the game, but give him another year or so, and then if the the record's not improving, that seat will get a little warmer.
He takes a whole new responsibility with camp right around the corner, which, I mean, he has the players, right? He didn't get to have the spring ball with his team and then go through the summer. Yeah, he was there before camp, which, I mean, fall camp's probably the most important part of the year for your team building. But it's just one season. It was one season. Let him have a full year under his belt and see what happens.
No,
Fair
Jesse,
enough.
we're not letting him have a full year.
Yeah.
Stop
One
this
full
full
year.
year. No full year narrative,
God,
Jesse.
you think we're the SEC here? We can't beat Saban, so we're going to fire our coach.
Hey,
Right.
he
nature
got
of
his
the
start
beast.
in the MAC. I want to point that out.
Yeah.
He got his start at Toledo, and I hold that very proudly. Him and Gary Pinkel back to back. I'm just saying the SEC runs through Toledo. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about, obviously, players. We kind of briefly touched on a couple different players. Who do you guys have as player who breaks out this year? We saw Lou Nichols' coming out party last year. We saw DeQuan Finn, his coming out party. Is there a guy that you think is under the radar who has a true chance to kind of break out this year? And Jesse, I'm going to let you. This one's all you, man.
I'm fired up, man.
Here we go.
Here we go. Look,
God.
group of five guys last year, I had a horrible take. My horrible take was I had a group of five team that I thought was going to take it all the way. Everybody's talking about Cincinnati, everybody's talking about Houston. And I was like, no, it's all about Tulsa. Tulsa is the team. Wrong. Cost my buddy Jeff there a lot of money on week one. But this year, there's something about Eastern Michigan. They're a team built for destiny, and I think it's because Taylor Powell, because they have a coward Ben Bryant that just left, so they're going to be a lot better now. No, in all seriousness, Taylor Powell, he's not just coming from no experience. I mean, he was a good player at Troy last year, and then he got hurt. He got hurt. I think it was against South Carolina. I think he broke his leg or towards ACL at one. And he's coming to Eastern Michigan now. He's coming to Eastern Michigan healthy. He's got the best receiving core in the MAC. This guy's going to put up some points. And I see these guys getting a lot of wins. I see Taylor Powell's name getting mentioned more and more week after week, especially when he starts getting those big time wins. If he beats NIU, I think Taylor Powell is going to be a name that the MAC will be repeating.
I respect it. AJ, I know you have a wide receiver out of Miami you think is going to have a pretty good year.
So, I like Mac Hippenhammer down in Miami, the Penn State transfer. I was he's from Fort Wayne, so I was golfing a few weeks ago, and I got paired up with his dad. And so we were talking about it and whatnot. And, we talked to Coach Chuck Martin a little bit about him at Media Day, and he's very lucky in the sense he has Gabbert at quarterback. Coach Martin talked about Gabbert's toughness. Obviously, it's in his blood, who his brother is, Blaine. But yeah, I really think Mac, coming from the Penn State, playing the Big Ten, playing in front of 110,000 people on a regular basis, taking that. He also played baseball there too. And then he comes to Miami, plays baseball and football. He's an all-around great athlete. And I think Hip's going to have a fantastic year. In order for Miami to get back to Detroit, it's going to be he and Gabbert are going to have to be a 1-2 punch. I really think they can do that.
So I actually kind of got a duo, and we kind of touched on Kent State a little bit. But I think Colin Schlee, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
Yes.
And Dante Cephas. I'm excited to see this combo. Schlee's he doesn't have a ton of experience, but he's a pretty good sized kid. He's athletic. He can throw. So if he can get it figured out and get those guys to be a tandem, I mean, that might be the thing Kent State needs that puts him over.
Yeah, I love that pick. I am high on Colin Schlee over there at Kent State. I think, he's been in that system long enough. He got to learn from one of the greatest quarterbacks in Kent State history in Dustin Crum, and you get Dante Cephas back that you get to just chuck the ball up to. And I love that tandem right there. That's going to be a good tandem. And that's why I think Kent State, of the teams in the East, will be the ones to challenge Miami the best.
Yeah.
Solely because of that combination right there.
Yeah, I think those are all good picks. I'm gonna go actually with another wide receiver. I'm looking at what Joe Moorhead's doing at Akron, and it really intrigues me. He hit the transfer portal hard this offseason, and one of the guys that he went out and got, who I am a big fan of, Shockey Jock Louis from Pitt, right down the street here from me. As you guys know, I'm in Pittsburgh. I've watched this guy play for the last 4 years. This is a guy that has amassed over 1,000 yards receiving here at Pitt over the last couple of seasons, averaged like 12 and a half yards per catch. You will recall last year, Akron freshman All-American Kanata Mumfield, he transferred out after Tom Arth was fired. But they bring in Shockey Jacques. Again, this is a guy, 12 yards of reception, over 1,000 yards receiving in his career at Pitt. I think DJ Irons and Shockey Jacques is going to be a nice combination for them. Akron also got Daniel George from Penn State, who's going to be a wide receiver on the other side. So they're going to have 2 Power 5 transfers there on the outside at the wide receiver positions. Akron is a team that I think is going to surprise some people this year because a lot of this, Power 5 talent that they got out of the portal. But those 2 guys specifically, those 2 wide receivers, Shockey Jacques and Daniel George, I think both of them could have really nice years for this.
I wonder how they got him from Pittsburgh. If he's having that good of a career there.
The name Joe Moorhead.
Yeah,
that's how you get those guys. And I mean, Joe Moorhead, obviously, in his first year as the head coach at Akron. But I think if Akron was going to go for a home run hire, that was absolutely the best pick you could have in college football, unless your name's Nick Saban or, one of the other big guys. I think this was the absolute right move for Akron to go out and say, we care about this program. We've invested this money in these facilities, in these players. Let's go try to win a championship. And I think Joe Moorhead brings the experience and the knowledge to be able to do so.
Yeah, they're with their rebrand and everything. They got the portal's going to help them so much because they ought to be able to get guys that may leave the state of Ohio and go to a Pittsburgh or to, somewhere where they think they're going to go play, a bigger brand of football. And they're either not going to like it, they're not going to quite get the PT they were looking for, or they're just going to want to come back home. And you'd like for Akron to be one of those places that can draw them back. And then, they'll have it in their mind that they can come and play right away, which for now they probably will. And then if, Joe Moorhead's the real deal in recruiting, then he'll be able to sell them on that too.
I really hope too Akron gives Coach Moorhead a longer leash, unfortunately, like they haven't with former coaches. Coach Arth kind of inherited a mess when he came in, and so he got a year and a half in. And we spoke to him at Media Day last year. Such an incredible guy. Maybe that's why I have a little more attachment to him. He was our first real coaching interview at Media Day. He was awesome. I think he's the San Diego. Is he with the Chargers now, Alex?
Yeah, I think he's an offensive staffer with the Chargers.
Yeah, he's like the passing game coordinator or something. But nevertheless, I think Akron, as long as they give Coach Moorhead the resources and the longer leash to develop something and not can him after 2 years, I think they'll be all right.
And Akron to me is the one program in the MAC that should be so much better than they are. They're right in the middle of an incredibly fertile recruiting area. Their facilities are just as nice, if not nicer, than anybody else in the conference. I mean, InfoCision Stadium, what is that, 10 years old? I mean, it's not that old of a stadium. Been built pretty recently. I mean, they have the facilities to do it. They're in a great recruiting area. I feel like if Joe Moorhead can take advantage of those things, Akron is a team that's going to be a problem here for the rest of the night.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think that unfortunately, Northeast Ohio has been known for what? Basketball, not football, at least in terms of the Mid-American Conference. You look at Kent State and Akron being big basketball schools, Akron and Kent State just playing for the MAC tournament championship this last year. So that is what draws people that way. Not saying that football can't be relevant, but that's the big draw over there. So I do agree with you. There's a lot of incredible football talent in that area and surrounding that area. I just think that, unfortunately, those schools have realized our investments in basketball, and we can go and be really competitive at basketball really quickly. So but I agree with you. There's opportunities there, and hopefully these guys can right those ships.
And it has to be hard to be a Mid-American Conference coach in the state of Ohio. I mean, because if you're recruiting one kid, every other school in the state is recruiting that kid. If Toledo's looking at a kid, so is OU, BG, Kent, Akron, everybody else, maybe even Ohio State, or maybe a Baldwin Wallace or a Cincinnati even. So it's got to be tough. And I think as long as coaches can produce, like a Coach Moorhead, you bring in a big name who comes from Oregon, who was successful. And I think DJ Irons fits very well into his scheme of having a mobile quarterback. You see what Oregon's done over the past 5-7 years at the quarterback position. I think that's going to be huge for him, but he's going to have to and he's in a good spot too, being close to Pittsburgh, not far from West Virginia, a lot of that talent around there, but he's really going to have to recruit Ohio hard.
So let's talk about these conference games, right? Obviously, we mentioned October 8th being the de facto MAC East and MAC West championship games. What other games are you guys kind of keeping an eye on this year? For me, obviously being a Toledo guy, Bowling Green, Toledo, I always keep my eye on. That one's an important one to me. Northern Illinois, Toledo, another one. But I'm really excited to see what Miami and Ohio do this year, because that's a huge rivalry there. I think, going back to Jesse's point about giving Tim Albin a little bit more time, I would love to see Ohio be really, really good this year, solely for the purposes of that rivalry.
I was more looking at out of conference, really. One of the biggest, best out of conference games I can't wait for in the MAC is actually when Ball State goes to University of Tennessee.
I'm so pumped for that game.
we were on our Group of Five podcast. We can't stand Tennessee because we're from Middle Tennessee State. And we're like, if any SEC team is going to drop the ball, it's going to be Tennessee. And it's going to be the Ball State. So, and I think y'all are going to that game, right?
Yeah, I'm driving down next week to cover that game. My cousin, who is a big Volunteers fan, says if I wear any Ball State stuff, I have to sleep outside. So I've already packed my tent, my sleeping bag, everything's ready to go. Because chirp, chirp, baby, we're ready to watch those Cardinals beat them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ball State's, they're going to struggle with NIU, Central Michigan, and Eastern Michigan, but Tennessee, they got a shot. I really believe so.
When it comes to Miami, this isn't a conference game, but I'm really looking forward to seeing them play Cincinnati. And I feel that's at a neutral site, isn't it?
Paul Brown.
Bengals Stadium. Yeah.
So that's going to be
there for that.
That's going to be an awesome game, an interesting game, and kind of like a benchmark, I think, for Miami to see, how this team hangs. And I don't see why they can't hang and even beat them if they play well enough.
Absolutely. That's another one that we'll be covering. So we're going to be at 7 games in the first 4 weeks of the regular season. So that we're doing that game and Toledo, Ohio State, same day. Talk about a long day.
Wow.
So yeah, that's going to be fun. But yeah, no, I think Cincinnati, for everything they did to break the glass ceiling for the Group of Five last year, so incredible, making the playoffs. And everybody talks about, Cincinnati, look, they got blown out. We've seen bigger losses by Power Five, out in the playoffs than what
look
Cincinnati
at Michigan.
did.
They got steamrolled by Georgia
later that day, and Cincinnati was at least in that game until late. I mean, you knew Georgia, Michigan. You knew Michigan didn't have a shot after the first 2 or 3 drives. You're like, this is bad. Now,
absolutely.
Sorry to get off on a tangent. Yes, Cincinnati was getting the ball run all over them right away, and for whatever reason, Alabama decided to try to get away from it. But I mean, it was a 2-score game. I mean, into the fourth quarter. So it's not like they just got abused like Notre Dame does.
They didn't lay down and just take it. They said, no, we're going to fight and we're going to try to win this game. Yep. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for that Miami game. That's going to be a lot of fun. Like you said, at Paul Brown Stadium. That one is a big one for multiple reasons. A premier Power 5 program who is in transition to become a premier Group of 5 program in transition to become a Power 5, and a Miami team who looks to be one of the best teams in the Mid-American Conference this year. I'm really excited for that one. And I think, that's a battle for the victory bell. So, that's a rivalry game itself. That's a big one.
And recruiting bragging rights too. If you can somehow win a game, now you take a little clout from Cincinnati.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to go on the trend too of a non-conference game, and that's Pittsburgh at Western Michigan this year. Pittsburgh travels to Waldo Stadium, and Western went to Pittsburgh and beat them last year. They beat Kenny Pickett. What's not Heinz Field anymore? What's it called? Some insurance field.
Acrisure Stadium.
I don't know how I won money off that game last year. I am just. I actually bet Western Michigan at Pittsburgh last year. It's the only thing I'm good at. At one time.
Hey, you got that one right, Jesse. We respect it.
Follow me on betting. I get them all right.
I have a buddy of mine who plays for the Steelers, and he's tweeted out a few pictures of the missing ketchup bottles because he's like, "This is not, this is not right at all." But yeah, I think Western's an interesting spot this year, having to replace Caleb Elby and Sky Moore in particular. He's crushing it with the Kansas City Chiefs right now. And Western has a couple of options at quarterback. They bring in an Alabama transfer, Stone Hollenbeck, who I think may have the starting job right now, but they have Jack Slobek, who's been in the program, and Marian Habrowski, who's been around a little bit too. So Coach Lester, he's another one of those coaches who's been a starting quarterback as a freshman. And, he's going to develop a quarterback. He got an extension last year after the bowl win. So he's going to be around a little bit longer. I know Western fans are still, the jury's out on him still, but we've had him on the show a few times. I think he'll be very successful at Western and beyond. A couple of months ago, we had him and my high school football coach. They were teammates at Western back in the day. My coach was his offensive tackle for 3 years. And so we had them on, and they talked about being a Western Michigan Bronco in the 90s and going to the Rubber Bowl against Akron and playing against Jason Taylor and guys like that. And so I think Coach Lester is going to have those guys ready. Was that week 3? I believe they play Pitt. And Pitt comes into the season ranked 17th. So Pitt's going to go to Waldo ranked 17. Waldo's a tough place to play, especially early on in the season. But I think that's going to be a really interesting one.
You got to look too at that Eastern Michigan at Louisiana at the Cajuns. Yeah. That's a benchmark game if Eastern Michigan is going to be back, like we've all kind of been saying. I mean, Louisiana will be down a little bit, but they're still going to be really good. They still got a really good culture there. They're going to have a younger but a really good O-line still. So we'll see. And that is a hostile environment.
Yes, it is. You can see that on TV, right? You talk about watching that crowd get wild and rowdy, and that place gets rocking. And I'm excited for that one. I think I'm going to trust Jesse and put all my eggs into the Eastern Michigan basket. So
I love Louisiana, and I told him on our Sunbelt podcast, like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I'm going Eastern Michigan." And by the way, Alex, I'm sorry I started this trend. Not one person answered your question correctly. Now,
hey, you know what?
May follow up.
You know what? It's okay, because I'm going to throw out my favorite non-conference one that I'm excited for: Coastal Carolina Buffalo. That was a battle last year. Buffalo lost that one by 3 points. I think it was like 28-25. But nobody was picking Buffalo at all. Coastal Carolina was ranked in the top 25. That was a fantastic game. I'm looking forward to Buffalo traveling down to Coastal to play that game. So that one's going to be a fun one. That's one I've got circled on my calendar for the non-conference slate. And that's also another one of those week 3 ones. I feel like week 3 this year for the MAC just has so many great games.
There's a bunch of good. The first 3 weeks, there's a bunch of good non-conference, like good on good. NIU's at Tulsa week 2 is a good one. I mean, you got all the Power 5 ones, but there's like a lot of good. I mean, Bowling Green versus Marshall. I mean, geez.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm just curious here, kind of sidetrack. Have y'all been to a lot of Tuesday Maction games? Have y'all attended quite a bit Tuesday nights?
I have been so cold on so many Tuesdays.
I bet.
But I love every minute of it. I don't care that there's 10 people in the stands. I'm one of the 10, and I'm the one losing my mind on ESPN. I love it.
Fantastic.
I've done a few, of course, in Muncie when I was there, but I've done NIU, done a few other ones. But I did NIU at Ball State in 2013. I guess for Ball State, it was Willie Snead, Keith Winning, Juwan Edwards, Jonathan Newsome against the juggernaut of Jordan Lynch. And watching people to watch him play live the Heisman year was just incredible. Yeah. I mean, this dude was a man amongst boys. And we talked to him a few months ago when we were at the NIU Spring Showcase and got to know him a little bit. We're going to work on getting him on the show. But you look at some of the guys like him, he's coaching high school football now back in Chicago, where he's from. And so it's like.
And his brother just transferred into Northern Illinois.
He did, yeah. And so that was.
At quarterback.
At quarterback, yeah. And that was a really fun environment. And we were there, like I said, for the showcase, and they have a fantastic stadium. Their venue it's a lot of fun. And what Coach Hammock has going on there is awesome. I remember that night I was on ESPN. My dad and my brother were in Muncie. I was at the game, and they're at a bar eating and drinking. And all of a sudden I look at TV, and there I am, cheering and all that stuff. Because that was a close game up until the last 3 minutes or so. We had a pick six, something a fumble there as well. But it was cool because Brady Hoke was coaching in Michigan at the time, and he needed Ball State to beat NIU to help Michigan in the rankings. And so he paid for 200 Ball State students to take a bus trip from Muncie to DeKalb and paid for all of our food, drinks, everything, just for us to go there and lose by like 14 or something like that. So.
Talk about a great story, right? I mean,
I was muted, but that's freaking cool. That's pretty funny.
It was a lot. I mean, he bought all of our boxed lunches and dinners. The annoying part, though, is you lose an hour.
Is that legal?
Yeah, that is corruption. That is political corruption at its finest.
He's an alum, though, so I think he gets a pass. I don't know how that works. But yeah,
it's like some Belichick stuff right there, huh, Sprouse?
Don't get me started.
Because we go to Chicago, and it's an hour. They're an hour behind us, and then we get back. we had to jump up another hour. So we didn't get back to Muncie until like 6 a.m. And it's like, we're not good. We're not doing this anymore. We're not going to class. It's going to be a random Thursday. We're just going to hang out and do nothing.
We are excited. I mentioned to you guys, we're covering 7 games first 4 weeks of the season. We're covering 2 conference games, Western Michigan at Ball State, because we've got those relationships with those coaches, but Buffalo at Eastern Michigan. And I'm excited for that Eastern Michigan one. I live in Toledo, so I live 45 minutes away from the factory. I've never been. So I'm excited to go to my first game up there, see the gray turf, see the players knocking the bricks over with the big sledgehammers as they come out. I think that's such a ridiculous, but such a cool thing to start every football game.
You got to have when you don't have a ton of history and tradition, you got to do something like that that makes people want to be there before kickoff. We got to quit tailgating. We got to go into the stadium to see them knock down the stupid bricks because that's what they do. I mean, it's like you said, it sounds stupid, but everybody knows they do it, and
it's cool.
It gets people talking about it.
Yeah. It's I remember the first time they did it, and they struggled to knock over this brick wall. And you guys have all seen the video all over before, and they're just sitting there, and it feels like they're sitting there for like 3 minutes trying to knock over this brick wall. And I think at some point they just kind of shove it down and then just run over it. I'm like, this is peak action right here. This is wonderful.
The other team was like, we got them.
Yeah. The other team said us by 40. Let's do this. Yeah. Last thing I guess I really have. Which team has the best chance of going undefeated in conference play in your guys' mind? We've got quite a few potential, guys who can go 4-0, whatever. For me, I like Buffalo. That's my out of conference.
Out of conference or in
non-conference? Undefeated in non-conference play.
Okay.
I like Buffalo. They play Maryland at Maryland. We all know how terrible Maryland is. They've got Holy Cross at home. They've got Coastal Carolina on the road, a game that they barely lost last year. And then they travel to UMass, former MAC foe, who is, the kicking child of college football right now. So I think for me, Buffalo has the best chance of any team. I don't think Toledo does it. As much as I would love to see Toledo go in and knock off Ohio State in Columbus, Toledo's not doing it. I don't see Bowling Green doing it. They have to travel to UCLA to begin the season. I really think, for my money, Buffalo has the best chance.
Well, I'll just go ahead and get mine out of the way.
Eastern
Guess who it is, guys?
Michigan. Not a chance, dude.
I don't.
They do have a show. They do.
What do you mean? They play Louisiana. I think they beat Louisiana.
We can bet right now on
Arizona
this podcast,
State.
They go 1-2 in their non-conference.
I think they have 4 non-conference games.
Do
they do. They play.
Yeah.
They
Good take, Jeff.
1 and
so
3.
Anyway, hey, I'm talking, Jeff. I'm going to say Louisiana. They beat Louisiana, Arizona State, UMass, and then Eastern Kentucky. East Kentucky. That's 4-0, Jeff. What are you talking about?
You're tripping. They're losing to Arizona State and Louisiana.
Well,
and UMass might give them fits.
No, as you can see, this is basically our podcast. Any take I have just pretty much against it. I can say the sky's blue. He's going to say it's green.
Oddly enough, the sky's purple, so you're both wrong.
See, there you go.
It is.
Well, Jeffrey, let's go to you then, sir. Which MAC team? Which MAC team?
I mean, I'm going to stick with who I think is going to win the whole thing is NIU. I think they could beat Tulsa. I think
you're such a Ben Bryant.
They're going to beat Vandy. Kentucky's their hardest one, but I'm not sold on Kentucky. Everybody's high on Kentucky. I just don't see it.
Well, after Miami beats Kentucky, I mean, anybody can beat Kentucky.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think NIU.
Yeah, I was, my choice too was NIU as well. They're going to beat Eastern, they'll beat Tulsa, they'll beat Vanderbilt. Kentucky, you look at their first 4 games. They play Miami, and they play they play at Florida. So they're gonna go to the Swamp week 2. Home week 3 for Youngstown State, then again home for Northern Illinois. I think NIU by that point will be primed, ready to go, coming off a big win against an SEC foe and Vandy. I really, really do think, because we saw it last year. NIU went to Atlanta to beat Georgia Tech. Rocky Lombardi's back. 95% of the roster is back. Coach Hammock has a good staff around him now. I think they can really go down. It was at Kroger Field down there in Kentucky. I think they can really go there and win.
So you're telling me you guys don't think it'll be Kent State who takes on the defending champs and
Tough
Oklahoma
break for Kent
and
State.
Washington? No? Okay.
Imagine being Collins Fleet. You're breaking in your first year as a starting quarterback. D1, first month of the season. You got to play Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia in your first 4 weeks. No, thank you.
He's going to grow up fast.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's my scholarship, coach. Have a good one.
Yeah. Right. I think, guys, we've made fun of it. I think Ball State's got a pretty good shot at this thing. Yeah. Okay. I mean, Tennessee is Tennessee, but if they upset it, like if I heard correctly, like 3 of us on here just said they were gonna, then I mean, Murray State at Georgia Southern.
At Georgia Southern. It's crazy. I'm just overlooking Tennessee, but I'm like, well, they're going to Georgia Southern. That place could be hostile there.
Yeah, right.
No, it is. Yeah, that actually, that might be, that'll be a pretty good game, I think. And then UConn. I mean, yeah, Tennessee's a big if, but it's doable. And NIU, I mean, I don't think that, and I think that's done. I think they do. I mean, I don't think that's Kentucky. They're gonna beat Vanderbilt. I mean, that's just clear.
Vanderbilt's not winning a game this year.
Vanderbilt's losing to Hawaii here in a couple days.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Zach, you're a smart guy. What do you say?
I mean, when I look at every non-conference schedule here, I mean, with a couple breaks, I see a few teams that could do it. I mean, I even look at obviously Toledo plays Ohio State, so they're out. But other than that,
you guys heard it. Zach just said Toledo's beating Ohio State. Confirmed. There it is.
And then they
gotta go to San Diego State.
And then they lose to San Diego State the following week is what would happen there. Yeah.
But because of a penalty, that'd be how that would work out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to disagree with Northern Illinois. The way it sets up, that definitely feels like the most likely scenario. I also, though, Jesse, I'm kind of with you on Eastern Michigan. I mean, Arizona State's a train wreck right now. Jaden Daniels transferred out after last year. Herm Edwards is on the verge of getting fired. That coaching staff is in disarray. He's replacing a bunch of people. I don't think Arizona State's going to be very good this year. No. I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about what the Raging Cajuns are looking like. I know they lost a lot, but I mean, if Eastern Michigan could go down and win in Lafayette in week 2, they go into Tempe with a head full of confidence. I could see them winning that game against Arizona State. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think that's like a cakewalk that most Arizona State fans would think it would be.
I promise you, Sprouse and Murph are looking at that. Not even looking at Arizona State. They're that confident Louisiana's going to be Eastern Michigan. I'm not sold on Louisiana this year. They are. They're not going to be the same team as they were last year. I'm over here getting voicemails from fans from Louisiana telling me that I'm wrong.
There was at the Sun Belt Championship game last year, they had like 4 cops that stood on the stairs between the student section and the App State like parent section the entire game. Because these Cajuns
they're out of control.
Would not shut the hell up.
Were those Cajun raging? Is that what they were?
I guess that's where they get. I guarantee probably 100 years ago when they were like, "What should our mascot be?" There was like 1,000 students up there with their shirts off, flipping the bird, having signs say "F you this," and they were like, see somebody in their little Cajun accent was like, "They're from Raging Cajun," and then they just put it on the helmet, man.
Well, they did their homework too. When we played down there, they knew stuff about your mom.
Yeah.
Who your girlfriend was. Like these fans do their homework and they get personal, and they're like literally 6 feet. There's no room on the sideline, so they are absolutely brutal.
Well, Taylor Powell's going to shut them up by second quarter.
Yeah. Man, I'm liking Jesse more and more the more I talk to him right now. I'm really liking Jesse over here. This is great. Jesse, if you need to jump ship and come join our show, it's
all about the Mac, baby.
I'm excited. This fall is going to be great. Big shout out to you guys. Thank you so much to Jesse, Jeff, and Matt from Group of 5 Guys. If you guys want to shout out your show, kind of talk about your guys' stuff, that please go ahead and do that now. I want to give you guys that platform.
No, man. Well, thanks for letting us come on. We had a blast, and if we're trying so hard to get up to Mac Country, and we got to link up with you guys.
Let us know, man.
Link up anywhere we can. But yeah, you guys, check us out. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's just Group of 5 Guys. And then we have the most fun probably on Twitter. at Group of Five Guys. That's the same thing. What it is, Instagram and TikTok as well. But yeah, I mean, we'll be getting out and about. I don't know about 7 games in the first 4 weeks. That's pretty damn impressive. But
we're
we'll
ambitious.
Out and about. So check the Twitter, see where we're at. Nothing more we'd like than to grab a beer and tailgate with some Group of Five fans. For sure. No, appreciate you guys coming on. Zach, if you got anything you want to plug, obviously a contributor over there at Hustle Belt. Appreciate the work you guys have done for now 12 years. Quite a long time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Putting in work over there.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. Yeah, covering the best little conference up here in the Midwest. Yeah. No, that would be my plug for Hustle Belt. Anybody looking for MAC coverage, MAC stuff, we all things MAC, we got it for you. We've been doing our season preview coverage over here the last couple of weeks. Starting next week, we'll start having some game previews and stuff like that. So check us out at Hustle Belt on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Zach_Folly. For that's any of my pieces for Hustle Belt, I tweet out on there. So yeah, Alex, AJ, appreciate you guys. Appreciate you having us on. Appreciate you guys also. We appreciate anybody else in the MAC universe that adds a little bit of coverage to our favorite conference. So it's always a pleasure being on here.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. AJ, did you have any parting words for the fans at home?
Football season.
Yeah. 2 words.
Hey, I was just gonna say, nothing screams college football is back like Northwestern versus Nebraska. That's how college football is back.
Or Vanderbilt versus Hawaii.
Yeah, right. At midnight. That's right.
And
At midnight.
They're not giving a lot of respect to these week 0 games. I'm fired the hell up for them. I mean, you got 4 or 5 games in my mind. I'm like, these were huge. Huge.
Football season doesn't start for us until Maction. That's when football season starts for us.
Take the over. Any Maction game, take the over.
Right. Yeah. Always.
Zach, you mentioned Northwestern and Nebraska at Ryan Field. Here in 2 years, we're going to have the CBS SEC music playing that game in.
Yeah.
It's going to be wild.
Yeah. What's going to be crazier, seeing that game on CBS or watching USC at Rutgers at noon on a November Saturday?
I love that too.
I can't wait for that.
God.
Big 10 rivals, Rutgers versus USC right there.
Yeah, right.
What's going to be better is when the women's volleyball at USC has to go out to Rutgers on a Wednesday night. That's going to make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right before finals on Thursday.
They got a final on Thursday.
Hey, those online classes did something. So
that's right.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, talking shop, talking a little bit of action with us. We really appreciate it. And guys, thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next week from Ball State at Tennessee. See you then.
See you.